忍びの時代は終わる。
螺旋が
That double-edged sword secretly awakened Momoshiki Otsutsuki. Yeah, I'm Nim without the E. Let's talk for a moment about chapter 28, or more precisely, a few very interesting points that you might have missed. But before that, if you want to help me break the algorithm by clicking hype on this video, I really appreciate it. So yeah, before we dive into the main point about the new sword called the double-edged sword, how about we start with Inojin and Boruto? No need for too much chit-chat. We know this scene is all about something funny, right? And I'm not lying. When Boruto threatens to shave Inojin's hair bald if he makes Himawari cry even once, it's honestly hilarious. But this is actually the part that becomes the key point. Even though at this moment, Inojin still believes that Boruto destroyed the Uzumaki family, just like the memories implanted in him, Boruto suddenly speaks in a way that doesn't match the role he's supposed to play, almost like he's being protective over Himawari. And this isn't something we can take lightly, because based on several moments, from Mitsuki and Boruto, to Himawari in the first chapter, where she expresses her belief that her parents are still alive and that Boruto isn't guilty, plus Konohamaru being saved by Boruto, and finally Boruto's unexpected reactions. These indirectly become additional pieces of evidence that Boruto's status is starting to be questioned. Yup, questioned as a criminal or even as a killer. And that also means these small actions will add more shinobi who will affiliate with Boruto in the future and believe that he's not a criminal or a killer, right? Second, this is about Kawaki. So far, I think this is the hardest part to guess. As we know, in chapter 27, Kawaki believes he's still capable of defeating Jura. He just needs a power boost, or more precisely, to completely remove his limiter. Because after seeing how Kawaki fought Jura, it's clear that we can assess and agree that Amado hasn't completely removed Kawaki's limiters, but rather there are still some restrictions he maintains to avoid the worst possible outcome for Kawaki himself. And unfortunately, that lie is revealed in the next chapter. Even though we know that at this point Amado is seriously considering whether he should follow Kawaki's wish to increase his power, that is also the problem. In the worst case scenario, Kawaki's body could be destroyed before he uses that power. But in chapter 28, Ikemoto leaves several hints or clues about whether Kawaki has already reached his full power or not. Yeah, I know. Looking at this scene of Kawaki lying down, it still raises two big questions. First, does this mean Kawaki's power-up process is complete, or is it only just beginning? In other words, Ikemoto seems to be trying another alternative to stall things a bit before Kawaki fights Jura. Simply put, with Mamushi moving much earlier than expected, this indirectly forces Kawaki to act quickly under Shikamaru's orders to assist Boruto. So that also means, before Amado fully removes Kawaki's limiter, there's another form of interference that prevents the process from continuing. You know what I mean, right? But does this scene really mean Kawaki has completed his power-up the way he wanted? I think at this point, not yet, but what do you think? Third, I know this may not be important, but when we see a fate where Eida ends up becoming a tree, this is also what will determine Kawaki's decision. By the way, I don't intend to discuss this case in depth, especially about daemons and the like, but I want to keep it simple. Kawaki and Eida. In other words, a romantic drama between Eida and Kawaki will either begin or end soon. Because I'm sure you all still remember the reason why Eida accepted Shikamaru's offer to stay in Konoha. Apart from Konoha not wanting any problems due to Eida's presence, Konoha also took advantage of this romantic drama because of Eida's feelings for Kawaki. This means that Eida stayed in Konoha because of her love for Kawaki and her desire to be with him. However, the problem is that as the story progresses, Kawaki is still indifferent and even rude to Eida herself. Regardless of how fans assume about Sumire and Kawaki, at least at this point, there is a clue or hint that will reveal whether Kawaki actually loves Eida or not. Or simply put, there will be many interventions that will disrupt Kashin Koji's prediction, and Kawaki is part of that. As we saw in the previous chapter, Kashin Koji stated that Boruto would die if he went to the battlefield and fought Jura. But unfortunately, that fate was broken by Kawaki's appearance. So, one of the interventions that will thwart the fate where Eida becomes a tree is Kawaki himself. But the question is, will Kawaki protect Eida or not? And again, it seems that after we've gone through several chapters about the love drama between Boruto, Sumire, and Sarada, is it now time for Eida herself? Because the most important part is, if Boruto protects Eida, then this will also determine the direction of the story going forward. Yeah, what do you guys think? Fourth, this is the important part, the double-edged sword. After seeing how Sumire explained about the sword, honestly, I don't see a problem with it. I mean, at least before we see how the sword performs in battle. Previously, when the sword absorbed Boruto's chakra, there wasn't any change in the sword at all, right? But whether it was just a mistake or a coincidence, there's a pretty significant difference when Boruto uses the sword to fight Mamushi. And as you can see, I don't think it's a coincidence. These two panels clearly show that when Boruto is in a defensive situation with the sword, it automatically turns black. And yeah, when Boruto blocks Mamushi's attack, or even when Boruto attacks Mamushi, the sword really does turn partially black. But for some reason, I suspect that this is a hidden part that Sumire herself didn't explain directly. That is, the sword doesn't just absorb the chakra of the person holding it, but it also absorbs chakra when it comes into contact with certain entities, such as Shinjut or something like that. But what do you think? Is this panel a clear mistake or just a coincidence? I don't think so. And regarding what I said at the beginning, if the sword actually secretly awakened Momoshiki. In short, all of this refers to the sword's ability to absorb Boruto's chakra. Yeah, I know that when it comes to chakra, we can't really judge how much chakra Boruto has, right? Because if it were Naruto, it would be obvious that most people would easily assume that Naruto has so much chakra that we don't need to worry about him running out. But in this case, the sword absorbs a small amount of Boruto's chakra. The question is it a small amount continuously? Yeah, you know what I mean, right? Especially in a sentence when Sumire says there's no need to worry as long as Boruto doesn't run out of chakra. Simply put, Boruto only needs to use it once to maintain his jutsu. But doesn't Boruto's chakra automatically decrease when he uses other jutsu that require a large amount of chakra? Especially at the point where Boruto feels that the sword is absorbing a small amount of his chakra. And in conclusion, there are 3 possible scenarios we can assume if the sword secretly awakens Momoshiki. First, even though Sumire said Boruto only needs to hold and activate the jutsu once, the sword will indeed continue to maintain its effect as long as Boruto does not run out of chakra. This means that there is another possibility that the more jutsu Boruto uses, the more it will affect his chakra. Second, in the context of what was described as small, it's still unclear. Does it mean small once or small continuously? Because if we say it only absorbed a small amount once, that assumption is wrong. Once refers only to the moment Boruto activates his jutsu, and it has nothing to do with whether the sword absorbs a small amount of Boruto's chakra once or continuously, right? Third, let's say points 1 and 2 are correct. Then, with the fact that Boruto will run out of chakra instantly if he cannot use his chakra wisely and ends up running out of chakra, it will automatically awaken Momoshiki. But the problem is, Momoshiki should have awakened when Boruto was fighting Jura alone. But what if the case is against Mamushi? Will Momoshiki still take over Boruto's body when his chakra runs out? Because once again, regardless of the deal between Momoshiki and Boruto, one of the things that allows Momoshiki to take over Boruto's body is when Boruto runs out of chakra. Yeah, what do you guys think? But in the end, if you feel that this is wrong and you have a much more reasonable perspective to refute this theory, I would be happy if you wrote it in the comments. And if you have any theories or questions, don't forget to use the hashtag AskNim. So yeah, thank you for watching. I'm Nim without the E. See you in the next video. Bye-bye, Data Bio.